And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me, the best Rhode Island long snapper in program history, Joe DeLeone. Joe, what's happening today, my man?
Not much. I'm excited for today's show. There's a lot going on in the college football landscape. The Ohio State Pro Day was making a little noise, and today's the perfect day for that happening. I didn't even realize it lined up because today we've got Chimdi Chekwa coming on, former All-American defensive back from Ohio State. So I'm excited to get into all that.
He is a former All-American at you said it right until you messed up the name of Ohio State.
The Ohio State,
Ohio State University.
I don't.
Yeah, I mean, apparently you got to put the. Like they wanted to. Did you see that they wanted to copyright the word the?
That was. Maybe we should ask Chimdi about that. His thoughts on that, because that's. Yeah. I do remember that it's a little. It's a little aggressive, you know. Like it's like you
a little. Have you ever met an Ohio State fan that's not aggressive?
That's true. That's true. One of my teammates was an Ohio State fan who was a kicker, and I never stopped hearing about Justin Fields and Ezekiel Elliott and all those guys. It gets a little tiresome, but
it does. It does. But you know, if there is a team outside of the SEC that is more like the SEC than anybody else, it's Ohio State. So we'll talk about him. And I'm really intrigued to know who their quarterback's going to be. Look, I'm not going to make any bones about it. I mean, call me Nostradamus, okay? Because I've been predicting what the Panthers were going to do for a while now, okay? Call me Nostradamus. Actually, Blake Stradamus. That's what I want to be known as the rest of the show. We'll talk to Chimdi about it.
Did you see, and I want to bring this up with Chimdi, did you see, though, that there's a clip of Frank Reich and Josh McCown,
and he said when you get to Charlotte or whatever.
Yeah, when you move to Charlotte, you'll have to find a court, is what he said to him, and like could not be any more blatant about what's happening here.
Oh, but
I think that as soon as they traded up,
but
it was done.
Well, here's something interesting. Okay,
yeah,
something interesting. The Panthers, as soon as they sold up to get the number 1 overall pick, also started to shop it. They called up
actually.
They called up in Baltimore and said, "What happened then? Got no, but my beam." I can't even sing the song because it's got so many curse words in it. But nevertheless, you know, Lamar Jackson's making some waves. We'll see. That's not happening. This isn't draft day, right? Like this isn't the movie Draft Day. But we'll talk to Chimdi. We'll talk to some Ohio State as well. Also, Nick Saban making more headways today as he was at Alabama's basketball practice after he is suspended. By the way, look what you did. Look what you did.
No, I know. Stop it. You try to claim this at the end of the show that I had something to do with this when we broke the news. Nick Saban has no idea that came from our account.
I guarantee you he does.
Unless I hear it from Saban, I'm not believing it.
What about if I got a staffer from Alabama to text you that it's true?
Then I think I would believe it.
Okay, well, you better ask the AYS people if that can happen, because
we'll discuss off air.
All I know is Italians stick together.
Okay.
All right, but we'll talk Nick Saban. Joe, I'm a little tired of him. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little tired of this. What they did today with Nate Oates, him going to the basketball court and practice and doing everything he's doing. I'm done. So today, and something that you're going to have to clip, I'm going to give you the reason why Alabama's falling. Has nothing to do with Tony Mitchell. And he deflected. And it's something that Nick does all the time. Nick never puts blame on Nick. Ever. He lets everybody else be blamed but himself. We talk about that here tonight and our thoughts around Nick Saban. Joe, did you know? So I put this poll out last season, and I put 3 teams in this poll. Excuse me. 3 teams in this poll. A team that gave up 187 rushing yards per game against their 3 toughest opponents. The teams were Georgia, LSU, and Alabama. Which team gave up 187 yards against?
It was Alabama.
It was Alabama. So Nick better be worried about something else other than what Nate Oates is doing. Oh, and by the way, you can't use that same verbiage in 2010, 2012, and 2014 and then start blaming Nate Oates. How about that? So we'll talk about Nick Saban as well. So good show. Going to be a really productive show. And our hiya Now, mosquito. Now you know it is officially spring inside the state of Louisiana when a mosquito flies in front of your face, Joe. That's y'all don't have out there in sunny California.
No, yeah, we're living really. Actually, I can't even say that the weather right now is good enough to justify the no bugs
out there.
It's rained continuously, and I'm sick of it enough to move back. I didn't move all the way out here, and I'm not paying the prices that I'm paying for rain 4 days a week.
I understand that. I understand that a lot. All right, we got a lot we got to get into, so let's do this, Joe. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. But before we do that, everybody on Facebook, do us a favor by hitting the like and share to all of those Facebook groups, share to all of your social media pages. We've gone over that 500 subscriber mark, a new channel, new show. We're very excited about it. So do us a favor by hitting that subscribe button and notification bell. We are streaming from our good platform and our good friends and our colleagues over at Believe. So if you're at Believe, just go over to Ruffino and Joe show at the end of the show. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, something I often forget about the audio sometimes. Do us a favor by hitting the like and share that as well, and rate, review, and subscribe. So let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. Joe, I'll give you the floor on Nick Saban, as most Italians are. I'm probably going to be a little long-winded on him, but we'll talk about Nick Saban and Alabama coming out of the break. We will be back in 50 seconds. Stay tuned. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. Texas.
No, they're not.
Football, you're not. So I got ridiculed before the show by a colleague, Josh Fisher from the Charity Stripe. Joe, you want to know my Final Four in March Madness?
You picked Texas.
I have Bama, Tennessee, Texas, and UCLA were my Final Four. Okay? They're all still in it. They're all still in it. So spare me this, Mr. Blake hates Texas. You know?
As much as you bash Texas,
football,
I will say this. Football. I actually think that they're going to run the SEC in basketball. I think that they are going to put up a huge fight in basketball, which is weird because they're not supposed to be a basketball school. They're supposed to be a football school. But considering their success already with an interim head coach, they're going to do some damage.
Cam Rogers says, Blake, when's LSU's basketball game this weekend? It's actually Friday. The women's basketball goes out to Greenville, South Carolina. Women's hoops. Okay, they take on the Utah Ute. So, Cam, shove it, bud. Joke's on you, you Mai Tai drinking son of a gun. What does he drink? What's his favorite drink?
Screwdriver. The
screwdriver.
Every time he's on an airplane, he's got a different screwdriver.
I want a screwdriver. You know, you got to be careful when you say I want a screwdriver to certain people in certain parts of the world. Oh, that's all I'm saying. Eric Weinberger also joined us saying, let's go. Chris H. says, fake a PR stunt by Nick Saban and Alabama. So, Joe, let's start there then. Today, Nick Saban, so if you've missed over the last couple of days, Nick Saban came out and he talked about the Tony Mitchell suspension. So what they don't do, and which most media don't do, okay, is they cut out the question asking about Tony Mitchell, in which Nick Saban responded in reference to Tony Mitchell, who was arrested for a quarter or 3/4 amount of pound of weed, fleeing the police at a high rate of speed of 141 miles per hour. Nick Saban would say there's no such thing as being in the wrong place in the wrong time, which symbolized what Nate Oates had said about Brandon Miller, the Alabama basketball player, a couple of weeks ago. When he was, on a date with a girl. They were at a Waffle House, I think it was. He goes and brings the suspect, a handbag, whatever. You pretty much know that story by now. But Nick Saban came out today and he went to the basketball court and he started shaking hands, kissing babies, and shows that, hey, me and Nate Oates are fine. I didn't mean anything derogatory to it. Joe, I'm going to give you the first word on this. What do you think about Nick Saban's actions over the last 48 to 72 hours?
So I think that there's two sides to this. One, first of all, I do give Saban credit for holding a young player, an incoming freshman, accountable.
No doubt.
I think that it's very important in these situations. And look, I said this when we talked about Georgia and all the arrests that they were dealing with. I really do believe that it is a college head coach's responsibility to help mold and shape the young men that are on his roster, especially the freshmen, especially the young guys that have never been on their own in situations where they can get their own selves in trouble, but also help themselves succeed. So first of all, that is his responsibility. By suspending him, it doesn't show this or start this precedent with a young player of thinking my talent is going to get me out of situations if I do dumb things. That I give him credit for. I don't understand why the hell he would use that wording. The wording of there's no such thing as wrong place, wrong time, knowing exactly what Nate Oates had said weeks before.
Right.
That to me was ridiculous because, as you pointed out, in the past, Nick Saban has used this phrasing. And then now suddenly it's not applicable because of the basketball coach using that wording in a much more complex and also way worse situation if found guilty for the charges that were potentially presented for Miller in this situation. I don't want to dive into all that.
Well, just for clarity, so we don't get canceled. The district attorney said that they will not be bringing charges after all the evidence has been released. So just so we're all on the same wavelength on Brandon Miller.
Yes. What I was going to finish that point with, and thank you for clarifying there, is that for what happened with Brandon Miller, and we now have a little bit more light on that situation, at the time, it was a very, very terrible situation. And I just think that for him to take this dig at the basketball coach, I don't understand it. You know, it's very hypocritical, and it does not fit with the narrative that he should be displaying as the head coach of the University of Alabama.
You want your answer?
Yeah, I know that you definitely have the answer.
Let me give you the answer. In the early 2000s, Cam Robinson, who was a massive pick on the offensive line, along with Hootie Jones, were arrested in northern Louisiana for weapons and drug charges. This is what Saban had to say about them. So we have viewed this as if these guys just do these kinds of things to change their behavior. What does that even mean? I don't even know. He says, and help other people. That's ongoing. We don't know. I'm like, this is a direct quote. Okay. But they will continue to do that no matter. It will be handled internally. That's what Nick said when a certain situation like this happened in the past. Tim Williams also arrested on drug and gun charges. This was Saban's response. He says, this kind of behavior is not condoned in our program. Once we have complete understanding, we'll handle it internally. Tim Williams was suspended for a half. Cam Robinson and Hootie Jones were never suspended as well. Let me tell you what the classic Nick Saban thing is of all time. He deflects. He's the best media deflector of all time. When the persona is that his defensive coordinator is not doing his job, not a good defensive coordinator, and Pete Golding, he just lets it go. He doesn't go to the podium and say, no, guys, we have a top 10 defense, right? Top 10 scoring defense, top 10 rushing defense, top 10 passing defense. He never did that. When Bill O'Brien was getting absolutely eviscerated by guys like, I know that you weren't a big Bill O'Brien fan, and others, he never once came out.
I didn't necessarily say that it wasn't.
Play the tape. Anyway, Either way, let's take you out of it. Either way, would you admit that Bill O'Brien was eviscerated at times while he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama? Is that fair?
Yes. He was given a lot of the blame. Nick was not.
Nick never once came out and made the statement about how great his offense has been. He always talked about one thing and one thing only. Bryce Young. Nick always deflects. So when they lose to a team, he will let the media and everybody on the outside world think it's other coaches besides him. Here's the truth about Nick, and Nick always preaches. I went to a coaches conference one time. Nick Saban was the keynote speaker. I'll never forget this as long as I live. His opening statement was how players react off the field is a complete and utter translation of what happens on the field. Well, Nick, I'm so glad that you said that, because here's some thoughts, Joe. Saban can take all the shots that he wants at Nate Oates, and he knows what he's saying, because 1,000% he is trying to deflect and put off of Tony Mitchell onto Nate Oates in the Brandon Miller situation. And to some extent, I do think that he's trying to help Alabama by saying, look, guys, this isn't a lack of institutional control by the University of Alabama. We have things under control at the University of Alabama. He can take all those shots, but you know what he hasn't done? He hasn't been good in the turnover rate on his own defense. They were 80th in the country in turnover margin. They were 126th in the country in penalties. A very undisciplined team. So, Nick, how are you going to be out in a coaches conference and say what your kids do off the field directly correlates what's on the field? Well, let's look what's happening right now at the University of Alabama. Here's the biggest thing for me, Joe. He should not be saying one word about Nate Oates, and he shouldn't be saying wrong place, wrong time. Here's why. The three toughest opponents that the University of Alabama faced last year, arguably and debatably, not fighting over semantics, was LSU, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. I'm old enough to remember when Ole Miss led at halftime against the University of Alabama 17-14. Oh, and by the way, they had 191 net rushing yards. Judkins had 25 carries, 142 gross yards, and 2 touchdowns. They had 216 gross rushing yards. The sack yardage is what had them at the -7. LSU ran for 187 yards rushing. Tennessee had 182 yards rushing. They lost two of those games. Hey, Nick, instead of worrying about what's going on with Nate Oates and everything that's surrounding you and deflecting, why don't you make sure that your interior defensive line and your defensive linemen and the defense that you ultimately are calling is better than what it is over the last couple of seasons? Joe, here's the truth. One thing that we can say about Kirby, are guys being arrested at the University of Georgia? Yes. It's not reflecting what they're doing on the field. You know where it is reflecting on the field? Bama. Because how is it that over the 3 toughest games that you played, you're giving up 187 yards rushing? That is absolutely abysmal.
It's terrible. And you know what, this is actually the flip side of the coin here. This is very similar to, not in the gravity of it with the arrests, but do you remember last offseason when John Calipari, the head coach of Kentucky, took a dig at Mark Stoops, the head football coach at the University of Kentucky?
We're a football school now, is what he said.
Right. I just, like, why are we doing this? You know, and the aspect of Nick taking it as far to question, in a way, he is questioning the disciplinary capability of Oates by bringing up this statement, by bringing up his moral compass in a way, by using that wording, is exactly what he was doing. So it's very hypocritical to question that moral compass of
especially
Oates.
When Hootie Jones and Cam Robinson and Tim Williams were arrested for the same things that Tony Mitchell was arrested for. And by the way, I didn't even bring up Henry Ruggs. Okay. And I'm not going to bring up Henry Ruggs to some extent because Henry Ruggs was not there. He was already in Las Vegas. But the same kind of scenario somewhat happened. High rate of speed. He hit somebody. God forbid, somebody did pass away. But there's been a lot of disciplinary problems at the University of Alabama. And the truth is, in the chink in Nick Saban's armor at the current moment, whether Bama fans who are going to be, when you clip this, that are going to be in our Twitter mentions, no matter what happens, okay, you can't debate with facts. Joe, the facts of the matter is you can't have be 126 in the country in penalties and having things going on outside of your program and not say that there's an issue. Is Nick Saban going to probably win 11 games? More than likely. Yeah, they are. But I do think something, though, about all this to translate into a little bit of football. You ready? Yeah. I had an epiphany today. Have you ever watched the TV series House, MD, with Hugh Lowry?
Yeah, I've seen episodes of it.
So do you remember in the TV series when he would be trying to diagnose somebody with some crazy disease And then he would be in the shower, like brushing his teeth, and somebody would say, "Hey, House, you're an idiot." And then he would pop up and have an epiphany. Had an epiphany today. You know why?
Why?
Tommy Rees. It's interesting. Would you say that Tommy Rees's offense is built around running the football? Yes or no?
Yes, it is. Extremely.
Interesting. So is Georgia's. You know what's also funny, Joe? The two teams that beat the absolute dog manure out of Alabama up front, Tennessee threw for a lot of yards too. Don't get it twisted. But both LSU and Tennessee ran for 180 yards plus against them. I wonder if Nick Saban sat there in his office and said, man, look, the two teams that really kicked our ass up front really dominated us in the running game. I had an epiphany. I will tell you that there is some sourcing and some things going around that he met with Tommy Rees maybe a little bit before their bowl game when maybe he wasn't supposed to, before it was reported.
Oh.
But you know what the funny thing is Nick Saban is always out in front of these type of things. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that the Charity Stripe guys are in here and they're yelling at us in the chat about, well, what about Texas? Guys, I know that you lost by a point. Okay. But Alabama had 17 penalties, I think, 17 penalties or 15 penalties for over 100 yards.
Yes.
You're not in this conversation, and you didn't run the ball. Oh, and by the way, didn't you have Bijan Robinson? Yeah, how did that work out for you? And Sark still sucks. Anyway, I had that epiphany today, though, Joe. The teams that have dominated Alabama over the last 2 years, Georgia being one of them, ran the ball at a very effective clip. I wonder if Saban looks at that and says, I wonder if we need to go back to a more centric, focus, and simplistic offense and running the football and running the ball down the hill. Does that make sense? And what do you think about, like, when I had that epiphany, does that hit you?
No, adding that context without really having those numbers, I think that makes perfect sense. And a lot of times it's a copycat league, as everyone says in the NFL. It's the same case for college football. Whenever there's a trend of certain things that are working, we look at all the best teams in college football, the ones that are winning national championships, the one team that won back-to-back national championships. Their bread and butter is dominant along the defensive line and then running the heck out of the football and opening up the rest of your offense through that. And I think that Nick, with what he had with Bill O'Brien, that was a bit more pass-centric. We've got more quarterbacks in this scheme for Alabama that are not at all like Bryce Young, that are going to allow them to focus on being a more run-centric team, plus going and getting an offensive coordinator that is one of the most run-focused in all of college football. Now, I absolutely do believe that it's an overreaction league. We always see this when one thing starts killing teams, everyone, and that's why Nick has been great. Look, as much as we're giving him a hard time, that's why he's been great, is that he has always adapted without being stubborn enough to say, hey, I realize this kicked my butt. We're going to follow the trend. We're going to lean into it, and we're going to see if it can work for us. And it probably will. They're probably going to be in the playoff this year if we're being realistic because of all that.
Well, if they're not going to be in the playoff, they're going to be in the same position that they were last year in reference to because Joe, they're a 2-loss team to some extent, right? Like it's not as if that they are, like a really bad team. But you know what else is interesting? When I look, okay, Joe, at, like, you talk about it being a copycat league. Now we're about to talk to an Ohio State guy, right?
Yes.
I look at, like, Michigan, okay? And when I look at Michigan, they beat Ohio State, right? Well, I also looked at that game today and went back and watched the film. Joe, they had 252 yards rushing, 235 of that coming in the second half. You can at this exact moment. Now, can I be wrong? Yes. But at this exact moment, you cannot tell me when, like, you look at what the games I just mentioned with Alabama and Georgia and things like that, you cannot convince me that the I don't want to say the overall offense, but there's more of a trend from some of the bigger name coaches in the league getting back to the simplistic, simple nature of running the football down the hill. Because when I look at this Michigan and Ohio State, box score, and I see Donovan Edwards having 22 carries for 216 yards. Now, did he have that long breakout run of 85 yards?
Yes.
Sure, but it doesn't matter. And by the way, Blake Corum only had 2 carries for 6 yards in that game. I think it's a bigger thing that we're not talking about around college athletics and around college football, that I think we're getting back to what we saw maybe in the early 2010s from though, however, spread concepts. Okay. Football is very simplistic. It is a very, like you said, copycat league. But the more and more and more and more that I look at these teams and I see what they're doing in the running game, it only convinces me more. Like when I say, okay, well, how did Florida, as an example, beat Utah? So I went down this like laundry list of notes of teams today. There's no way that this team should beat them. Florida beats Utah. They beat them in the running game. Utah beat South Carolina twice. Well, you know what Utah did twice? They dominated them up front and in the running game. I think that you look at all these coaches and all of them talk, and I just sit here and say, you know what? They're going back to 2010 Trent Richardson.
Honestly, I mean, yeah, I know what you're trying to get at. Not quite literally Trent Richardson, but to your point is that, like, we do get a lot of setups with more heavy tight end usage along the offensive line. I think we get just a lot more reliance of, I mean, heck, the other thing too that I look at the amount of bigger backs that have emerged in college football. Like that to me is also a really interesting thing to pay attention to. I look at this year's draft class and there's like a number of guys that come to mind that are 215 plus. I look at Bijan, who was the top guy in the draft class. He's a bigger back. He's 215 pounds, 220 or so pounds. There is now an emphasis and a reliance, I believe, on maybe, I don't want to say old school football, and the old school running the ball, because I think we've evolved past that. But there's a bit of a throwback to what was successful in the early 2000s, which is the first thing that popped in my head is like Arkansas when, what they had with Darren McFadden.
Oh,
like
yeah.
The way that they ran the football, that immediately popped in my head.
Can you name the other 2 backs that were in that backfield with Darren McFadden?
Peyton Hillis, and then who was the third one?
I'm not telling you. You got to guess.
Dude, I was like 6 years old. I'm not going to remember.
I will give you a hint. He got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys.
DeMarco. No, not DeMarco.
No, he was
Felix Jones. Felix Jones.
Huh?
Felix Jones.
Well, look. I mean, the charity. I mean,
I didn't see that. I didn't see that. They said it right when I said Felix Jones.
You cheated.
No, I didn't. I didn't look down. Roll back the tape.
Okay, hold on one second, because I didn't write this down. I ran out of paper. I want to show you something else right quick if we have time, because we're about to talk about some Ohio State. We're about to talk some Ohio State with Chimdi, and I think it's interesting, Joe. You know what? I went back and watched that game too. I know that Ohio State lost. Joe, I go back and I look at that game, dude. They were running the ball at a high clip. I would love for you to tell me of a high-profile game last year where the team that won didn't run the football at a higher either run or yards per carry clip, or they did not just outright beat them up in the trenches. Can you name one? Because
what
I look at two,
South Carolina run for against Tennessee.
What's that now?
South Carolina. What did they run for against Tennessee? I want to look at this up.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to look that up. Maybe I did not look at that game, and nor did I.
I don't know if that's high profile though.
No, that's high profile. A top 5 team going down. I think that's pretty high profile. I mean, you wouldn't say that that's high profile, because I think that it is. I don't know that
South Carolina only. Okay, I know that I'm being only 153 yards rushing compared to the 453 that they threw for. But again, to your point, I feel like every week here's the better way to look at this.
Then what did Tennessee have?
152.
So they still beat them in the running game. Like, so they're still running the football at a high clip. So I would still give that to them. So I was just talking about that Ohio State and Georgia box score, right?
Yes.
Joe, here's another thing about Georgia, okay? And why that game, so Ohio State loses 42-41, like we remember that, okay? CJ Stroud was amazing, probably going to be the number 1 overall pick. Ohio State runs for 119 yards, 3.7 yards per carry. but Georgia runs for 135 at 5.2 yards per carry, right? And so when you get to these scenarios and these situations, I just can't, like now I can't unsee it. As Chris H says now, I can't unsee it. I can't unsee it. But I think that he was talking about this as the charity stripe on YouTube says, DeLeone is a regional theater Harry Potter. Is this true?
I have no acting skills, so no. The answer to that is no. I did. I just know that Josh is literally at his desk giggling like a 5-year-old right now, like 50 feet from me. By the way, he's still in the office. He is right there giggling like a child.
you know what Josh Fisher is? He's a poor man's Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, I could kind of see that. He's the Long Island version of Mark Wahlberg.
He's from Long Island?
Fisher?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You know they got a really nice iced tea.
It's a terrible joke. Let's not hold Chimdi too long.
I'm a father of two. I'm allowed to have really bad jokes. You know who's not going to have really bad jokes, though? Our next guest. Joe, you want to kind of give him a little bit of a I mean, it's an All-American. Right?
Yes.
Not like the TV show. Like, he actually went out there and won it all. I mean, like an All-American.
Yeah, so host of Believe in Buckeyes with Bryant Browning, Chimdi Chekwa, All-American defensive back, is now going to be joining us to talk a little bit about Ohio State. By the way, anyone who's an Ohio State fan that is checking out the show or the re-air, make sure you go check out Believe in Buckeyes. It's one of our best shows on the network. Very unique, though, that we've got 2 former Buckeyes on the show, and I always love watching and checking it out. I'm the one who does the video editing for it, so I always enjoy getting to check it out. But we've got Chimdi joining us now. We're going to be talking a little bit of Buckeyes.
So let's do this. Let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. We're back in 50 seconds. We got Chimdi coming with us next. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. I know. I probably shouldn't be playing a Texas bit, but Chimdi, first off, thank you for joining us. You're our first guest on the Ruffino and Joe show, but we play that every time we come back out of a commercial break. But how are you doing tonight, man?
I am honored to be the first guest on the show. I'm doing well. I'm doing pretty good.
Well, I mean, you're an All-American on the field, and we're just hoping that you become an All-American on this show. That's what we're hoping today.
I believe I can get there, man. I believe I can.
All right,
Chimdi, really.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Blake. I don't mean to. Well, I was going to say, though, Chimdi, appreciate you coming on. And I caught that you were tweeting a lot about the Ohio State Pro Day that went on today. And it was a lot of stuff coming out of that, going on with CJ Stroud, going on with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know that we wanted to kind of dive into the expectations for 2023, but having you here and seeing how things kind of worked out for CJ Stroud, I got to ask, do you think that he's going to end up a Carolina Panther after some of the stuff that we heard going on today at Ohio State?
Yeah, I think he will. I think it comes down to the measurables between him and Bryce Young. I think he's just a bigger guy, the more prototypical quarterback, NFL quarterback. And I mean, I think he's a very accurate passer, a guy who can make throws that I don't think many other college quarterbacks can make. There's some negatives there. Being able to take the yards running. I think Bryce Young can, if you're splitting hairs between the two, I think, but I think at times Bryce Young is a little bit more better at working the pocket and finding that player. Both very smart players, but I think he fits what the Panthers are looking for.
Chimdi, let me ask you this, because during the season, Joe and I were doing a Saturday morning show. We're breaking down all the games, and there was a statistic on CJ Stroud in reference to when Marvin Harrison was Jr. was in the game, not the Colts, Marvin Harrison. I mean, come on, guys.
Good.
But Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the game versus when he was out of the game. And it was a little alarming how bad his numbers dropped off. So let me ask you 2 questions, okay? Number one, do you think that that's a little bit of an overreach? Like if anybody loses a number 1 wide receiver, yeah, you would expect their numbers to drop, right? But then number 2, let me ask you this. Ohio State, which by the way, all of them are New Orleans Saints fans, or New Orleans Saints players. I mean, just ask me as a Saints fan.
Right.
But is it alarming to you just a little bit that I know that Marvin Harrison is coming back, but when he's out, that it's been so far of a drop off at that position, seeing like somebody like CJ Stroud have struggles when Harrison's out?
Alarming for Ohio State or alarming for CJ Stroud's projection?
Well, I guess both. I guess both in a scenario. Is it alarming for CJ Stroud? I don't think it is because he'll be the number 1 overall pick.
Right.
But for a new quarterback, do you think that could be just a little bit alarming?
I don't think so. I think Marvin Harrison is a special talent. What happens when you have such a special talent? This is the thing. It's like Ohio State has really good receivers, great receivers. Emeka Egbuka, I think, is going to be a highly touted guy going into the draft himself. But what happens when you have one guy who's so much better than everybody else? You feature that guy. It doesn't matter who else we have on the team. We feature that guy.
No doubt.
Took everything his way, and then when he goes out of the game, the game plan is now shooken up. You know, guys were prepared to do one thing. Now somebody has to replace him. So it becomes a little challenge. It becomes a little bit challenging to shift. I think if you had, because you got to think Ohio State had 2 guys out, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba, who they pretty much didn't have the whole year, and Marvin Harrison. These are 2 first-round draft pick receivers. So I think it's really just being able to adjust after game planning and focusing on one guy to be kind of the weight of the entire offense, and then play everything off of him. And then you lose that guy. It's like losing LeBron during the game, and now you have to kind of shift and adjust in game.
You brought up Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I really am intrigued by him as a draft prospect. But what gets hard for someone like him is that we don't have any 2020 tape. And having covered and paid attention to him, like what do you think? Do you think that impacts how, when, where he might get drafted? By the way, he ran a fantastic 40 time, which is a great number for him. But do you think that there might be some overanalyzation on the fact that he didn't play this season, and some people might overlook him for guys that did play this year?
See, this is the weird thing about scouts and analyzing players is sometimes too much film is a bad thing. I would say I was a guy coming out, a 5th-year senior, who had too much film, too many things for you to watch, too much stuff for you to say, you know what, he's good here, but he doesn't have the flexibility here. He's not getting out of breaks. And I honestly think him actually being out, it hurts in terms of, they question whether it's toughness here. They'll question, whether or not we have enough film. But though he did enough to be intrigued. And now you have to compare him to the other guys. And you can only compare him with the film that he already has, right? Because he's a high-level player. So I think really it doesn't hurt him that much. I think what would have hurt him if he came out and ran a 4.640, I think that would have hurt him.
No doubt.
I think he did enough to show that he had the speed. He has the speed. He runs his routes just better than all the other guys. He's a guy who there's nuance to his routes that as a corner, you get used to routes. You get used to receivers running the same things over and over again. Then you go against guys like Cooper Kupp. You go against guys like Wes Welker. You go against guys like Chad Johnson. And they have this little nuance to their routes where it's like, man, I'm just not used to doing it. I'm not used to this. Like just the way he turned his route. Antonio Brown was a guy. The way he did this is just not how everybody else does it.
Right.
They can add that element and not lose ground. And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is that kind of guy. And I think the teams, it has to fit their system. I think they have to be looking for more of a slot type guy, but he is a player that can be impactful at the next level.
Well, if he falls to 29, the Saints will take him. And Joe, to your point, it didn't hurt Jamar Chase not having 2020 film. That's all.
Well, that was during COVID time. That's why it gets weird. It gets so weird.
I know. I'm just joking. Chimney, I'm gonna give you a question that I can't let you walk out of here without knowing. Is Ryan Day really on the hot seat? Is this real? Like, can you please put this to bed? Because, Chimney, let me just tell you something. I've covered LSU as an example for a long time. We just talked about Chase as an example. Yeah. At 2019, legendary. You know, what it is, what it is. If your down year is you going to the playoff, let me just tell you something, brother. Sign me up, okay? Is he really on the hot seat?
He's not on the hot seat.
Okay,
but
thank you.
See, at Ohio State, though, the hot seat can get hot quick, though. So it's one of those things where he's not really on the hot seat. But, you know, you have a bad year next year, you lose to Michigan, then the seat gets hot really fast. So based on what he's able to accomplish, I know it's going to be another solid year. Now, Earl Bruce used to come talk to us. Earl Bruce, the former Ohio State coach, he used to say, you lose to Michigan 3 times, you're done. So if I judge it by Earl Bruce's logic, then he may be on the hot seat. But no, not realistically. I think the challenge is who do you replace him with? I think that's always what you have to look at, because Ohio State is also going to be very careful in who they would select as the next coach, right? And Luke Fickell's there in Wisconsin. I think that would be the one guy that you would say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. But I wouldn't realistically say Ryan Day's on any type of hot seat right now.
Do you think the Brian Hartline hire, do you think that's going to maybe help them out a little bit? Because everyone's talked about how Brian Hartline has been this big boost to the coaching staff, and we've seen the results with the development of these receivers. You're getting these 5-star guys coming in, and then immediately they're becoming NFL first-round draft picks. We don't see this level of progression happen this quickly. Now that he's the guy who's calling the plays apparently next season, do you think that is going to help this Ohio State team next year?
Yeah, I think it can. We have to see if he's actually going to. Ryan Day is actually going to let go of the play calling. That's TBD to me. That's to be determined. I think he's testing it out here in the spring. I think it would be helpful, because I think Ohio State's biggest challenge is like there's a lack of attention to detail that I feel like we had when we were there. But I feel like these teams are more talented than the teams. I mean, we had some talented guys. James Laurinaitis, Brian Hartline was on my team. Malcolm Jenkins. I mean, we had some guys. But
shout out to old Malcolm.
Yeah, huh?
Shout out to my man Malcolm. Sorry.
Shout out to Malcolm.
Shout out to Malcolm. Malcolm told me that one time in a Saints preseason game on the sidelines, he goes, Ruffino, you need to lose some weight. So shout out to my dude Malcolm. He never hold it. Chimdi, that man never holds his tongue. And he gonna tell you what straight conviction. I'm just gonna let you. I mean, you know that more than probably I do.
That's Malcolm. That's Malcolm. For sure.
I know.
For sure. But I think Ryan Day does need to take a little bit more of a CEO approach to be able to continuously identify what the minor things that are getting past them week to week that need to be addressed.
But so I should have checked ahead of time, and you said though that you overlapped with Brian Hartline. You guys were there at the same time at one point.
I did, yes. I played 3 years with Hartline. Yep.
Okay. So
was he just like the guard?
That's what I was going to ask.
What was it?
How hard to cover was he to guard? Like how was he as a receiver? I should say you guard him in practice and stuff like that.
Hartline was good. Hartline was a very. You see the development of his guys. Hartline was a very technical receiver. So he was in college. He wasn't that hard to guard in college. But I played against him in the NFL. Now, I was hurt when I played against him, but I did not do great against him in the NFL. I remember I was hurt. My knee was swollen, and I was battling injury. But I remember walking to the sideline thinking, man, is this the same guy from college? Because this is a lot tougher than what it used to be. But yeah, he was a pretty good receiver.
Chimney, along those lines, so Hartline is going to be the next offensive coordinator, obviously, for the Ohio State University. What do they need to do finally to take over Michigan? Is it an offensive issue or is it a defensive issue? Because we were just talking before the break. Okay, so example, we were talking Alabama and how the 3 toughest games that they had last year, opponents ran the ball on them for 187 yards per average, okay? Yeah. Then you look at like the Michigan game, they have 235 yards on the ground, massive second half. What do you think that they need to do to get to overtake that hump against Michigan this upcoming season?
Yeah, definitely defense. It's defense, and it's you know, I say this, the lack of attention to detail, but there's just things defensively that they're not consistently great at. And it's things that don't necessarily take a bunch of talent. It's just the ability to understand situational football, understand how offenses are attacking you, and understand where you're supposed to be and where your teammates are supposed to be. They've been challenged with that the last few years. They got better this past year, but in the secondary, I didn't think they did great. And then in that Michigan game, it kind of all fell apart. And I think part of it is new defensive coordinator, new rules. I think they'll be in that again this spring, and then have another camp. But I also think Ryan Day could help that by taking more of a CEO type role and approach to be able to continuously identify, okay, this is what we're not doing good. Even though we're beating these teams by 50 points, we're missing this thing. Like this thing that can hurt us when we play against a Michigan, when we play against a Georgia or whomever in the playoffs. And that's what I think they're missing.
Go ahead, Chimdi, the big question that we've got right now, I feel like with Ohio State that everyone's brought up, separate from the Michigan situation, is what's going on at the quarterback position. CJ Stroud's about to be the first overall pick, which it's becoming even clearer by the day that he's going to be the guy, the first overall pick. But at the same time, to transition and build off of the momentum from last year with all these receivers, you have to replace this supremely talented guy who was one of the best in program history. I think it's going to be Kyle McCord. That's just my assumption and who I think is the better guy of the two. But if, in your opinion, who do you think is the player that they should turn to as their quarterback next season?
Yeah, it's super early to really make the judgment, but I think it's Kyle McCord's job to lose. I also, if I was to make an early guess, I would say Devin Brown ends up being the starting quarterback.
Wow. Is it because of his legs, Chimdi?
I think it's more than that. So from what I've seen, and I mean, I haven't seen enough, right? I haven't seen much. and it's always hard to account for guys improving, right? So you see a guy, you say, oh, he needs to work on this, and then he works on it. And then, when he comes out the next time, he may actually be better at that. But Devin Brown, to me, has kind of this he's quicker at diagnosing what he's seeing and then making the decision. So whether it's to run, throw the ball to curl, throw the ball to flat, I feel like he goes through his progressions a little bit more, a little bit quicker, and it feels like he just has a faster clock in terms of in a better feel in their pocket than what I've seen from Kyle McCord. And that's based on very, very limited high school film and whatever. Devin Brown hasn't really stepped on the field in college. So what he's done in the spring last year and what he's done so far.
Chimdi, a couple more for you, and we'll get you out of here. Thank you so much for being our guest. Joe, do you want to? I'll let you take the last one because I know what you want to ask about the barbecue. I think.
Oh yeah. But I'll let you.
Chimdi, I want to ask you: were you on that 2007 Ohio State team?
I was. Yep.
Can you give me? All right. So I got two questions for you. Number one, what was your favorite memory at Ohio State? And then number two, that 2007 national championship game versus LSU in the Dome. What do you remember from that game specifically?
So I'll start off.
And look, I'm not trying. I'm fascinated by guys so. For example, okay, y'all went up early, and I'm like, oh crap, here we go, LSU again. So just both of those, what your favorite memory in that 2007 national?
So the 2007. The 2007 national championship was interesting because I grew up in Louisiana.
You did, baby. Yeah,
I too was a Saints fan growing up. I ended up moving to Florida when I was in 9th grade and went to Ohio State. But I was an LSU fan growing up. I was playing in the Superdome. I was so pumped up. It was my freshman year. I was starting at corner, and they had really good receivers. They hadn't thrown the ball a lot to the tight ends that year
at all.
So it was just speed against, it was we were getting knocked. Big Ten was slow. So they kind of built it into our heads that the LSU is fast. And we had this period during the week practicing where it was SEC speed period or something. We had to run. And I hated it because I was like, man, listen, first of all, I grew up in Louisiana. I was always the fastest kid. Like none of these guys are faster than me. I know half the team. I played against them growing up. Like I've been beating these guys in track my entire life. But when we got to the game, we focused so much on those receivers, and they beat us throwing the ball to these tight ends who were running wide open the entire game. We couldn't find them. They ran on doing the unbalance, and so it was one of those games where it was kind of a lesson. It was, be who you are and prepare, and know what you're good at. Be who you are, prepare, and if you do that, what got you there is what's going to end up getting you to win. So that's what I remember from that game is that I felt like our coaches learned the lesson that game, right?
Chimdi, interesting fact. Outside of the 2011 LSU and Alabama game, the national championship game, the second national championship game that had more NFL players on it was that 2007 national championship game between LSU and Ohio State. Out of I think 161 scholarship players, more than 2/3 of that team on both sides went to the NFL. How crazy is that?
That's crazy.
That's an NFL game if you really want to think about
crazy.
it.
And
What's your favorite? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Other thing about that game was I think it was Glenn Dorsey.
Yep.
I saw him destroy our offensive linemen so many times. I was like, oh my gosh, who is this guy, man? Like
number 3 overall pick. That's who,
He'd take like 2 plays where he kind of, he did what he needed to do. And the third down would come, he slapped the guy on the side of the head. I'm like, oh my gosh. My favorite memory though, I would say 2010, we went to the Rose Bowl out in California against Oregon. We had lost to Florida when I redshirted. We lost to LSU in the national championship. Then we lost to Texas in the Fiesta Bowl. So this year, nobody was giving us a chance against Oregon. We got the win the Rose Bowl. Terrell Pryor was the quarterback. It was a special moment for us. We had a good night that night in Cali. So that would be one of my greatest memories.
All right, Joe, I know you want to ask about the barbecue. Go ahead.
So I'm the king of asking the not irrelevant questions, but the random questions. I noticed in your bio on Twitter, the last line that you have in there is Pit Barbecue Grill owner. And I can't not ask, like, what is that referencing? So do you own a barbecue restaurant? Is that what that is?
Yes. Me, Bryant Browning, who also hosts a show with me, and a couple other friends. We own a barbecue restaurant, multiple barbecue restaurants, the Pit Barbecue in Columbus, Ohio. Yep.
What are they called? Plug it, share it.
The Pit Barbecue Grill.
Okay, the Pit Barbecue Grill. What's the address?
The address. What's the address? I mean, we got. So we're in a few different food halls. The Bridge Park Market. That's one. We'll be in the Bubbly Food Hall in New Albany. That's another one. And every food hall that opens up, we're pretty much going to be in those moving forward. So food halls are blowing up across Columbus. The Pit Barbecue Grill, get you a Polish boy, sausage, fries, sauce, Polish grill, sausage.
You're making me hungry right now, man.
Pork, fries,
everybody knows the rules.
Pit sauce, coleslaw. So yeah.
Not to hold you too long. What inspired that though? Because I think that's so. First of all, I love barbecue. I'm from New Jersey. I live in Los Angeles now, so like I can't get good barbecue. So getting to hear about barbecue just like it frustrates me a little bit because I miss it. But I might need to, man. I might need to take you up on that. But like, what inspired the venture though? Because I think that's so cool that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, it was just a couple of friends. I think I was still in the NFL at that time, playing for the Dolphins. Brian had finished up his stint in the NFL, and we had some money to invest, and we were like, let's franchise a restaurant. And we didn't find a franchise that really fit what we liked, right? We were like, this is just none of these actually fit. So let's do barbecue. Let's get some recipes, pull some recipes together from our family members. And what we don't have, let's create a sauce, our own like special sauce recipe. We did that, and it was good. So we got the recipes from our family members. We got the good sauce. We might as well go through with this. So we opened up a restaurant, and it kind of caught fire in Columbus. So we opened up another one.
Did you ever see Lincoln Riley trying to slow roast a brisket?
I have not seen it.
Okay, when you get off this show, go and type in Lincoln Riley brisket. And the appalled feeling that you're gonna have, this man don't know what the hell he's doing. He can call a great offense, sure,
Yeah.
Doing a brisket outside, that man is pure ass. Okay? That man doesn't know what he's doing. And the sad thing, Chimdi, he's from Texas. He should know how to do a brisket. You know what I mean?
Oh man, he
So
was
anyway.
spending his time. He spent all his time studying offenses and
Well, he
defenses
needs
and
to
whatnot.
study better because Tulane's coming for that butt. All right. Chimdi Chekwa was our guest, buddy. We'll have you on multiple times. Love to have you on during the season, especially as the season gets closer. We want to bring you on again. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Yeah, I would love to be back. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chimdi.
All right. That is Chimdi Chekwa, the former Ohio State All-American. What a great first guest.
Yeah, and I know he just hopped off, but I knew coming into this that we've got a lot of really great, talented college football belief hosts. I wanted to give Chimdi the opportunity. He joined at the very end of the season because I feel like not enough people know who he is and that he's or not so much to know who he is, but not
that
enough
he's
people,
doing a podcast.
yeah,
Stuff like that.
he's doing a podcast, and it's a really good Ohio State podcast. I think that there's just a lot of noise out there around the Ohio State program, and to hear it from him and Brian is awesome. Like, it's not like with Jason Campbell, who does the Auburn show, who we're going to have on eventually, that he's the color analyst for the radio broadcast. So
Right.
everybody knows who he is in the media. I'd love for Chimdi to get more opportunities. I think it was awesome getting to hear from the barbecue stuff. Was really cool too to hear that.
I feel like you're malnourished in LA.
A little bit right now because it's cutting season, Blake. But
For
there's
what,
not a lot of
spring break.
no. It's just for
Oh,
the summer.
yeah.
I want to look good. You know, it's
You're well past that, buddy. It happened. All right. So we will see you again. We don't know. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Saturday, but our schedules are being stupid. So, all right, we'll see y'all. Great episode.
great show.
Great episode, though. All right. Awesome. Fantastic. We'll see you guys again soon. We'll let you know when we'll be back. Until then, y'all have a good night. Oh, AYS too. AYS next. So y'all have a good night. Peace out, Girl Scouts.